Yeah, hey, welcome. My name's Kevin. I'll be chatting at you for like an hour and a half, 2 hours if you stick around for questions, which I recommend you do. It's a great opportunity to ask questions on anything. Um, yeah, I'm an AMGA certified rock guide and one of the owners of Vertical Pursuits, which is a climbing guide service. I mean, technically, we don't really guide much. We really teach you to become an independent climber. So you don't have to hire guides. So you can learn how to climb and then go climbing. That's kind of our shtick. And yeah, I do think it's really important who you're learning information from. Um, you know, yeah, I'm a certified guide. That doesn't necessarily mean I have a ton of practical experience. I get sick of kind of talking to myself in these intros, but you could check out our website and read about me in our bio and see if I might have anything to say. Maybe I don't know anything. Maybe I just have read a book and somehow the AMGA certified me and I barely climb it all myself. But I'm not going to brag, but if you'd like to know who you're listening to and then factor that into how you take in this information, you could check that out in our About section of our website. So I don't have to brag about myself in every webinar intro. But I do a lot of rock climbing, safe to say. And we'll leave it at that for now. Um, you can also look me up at amga.com/hire-a-guide. And you can look me up and see if I'm actually a certified guide. If you've been guided before, go to that website and look up your guide and see if they come up and see if they were being true to you about their certification level. That's always fun. People can be pretty misleading about that. But anyway, so look me up at amga.com/hire guide, and I think those links are going to be coming through to you. Um, and cool. So Vertical Pursuits, I mentioned some courses coming up. July 19th, Intro to Trad at Old Camp Bluff, 7,000 feet in elevation, nice cool temps, hot summer. Also July 19th, a Trad Beyond the Basics course, whip on your gear, get psyched to whip on your gear. And then also this winter, El Potrero Chico, Mexico, all sorts of stuff going on. I'll be out in Red Rock, probably in November. I haven't really put that on the schedule. Um, but yeah, we are talking about anchors tonight. It's not really an intro to anchors kind of chat. It's a bit more of like a continuing education discussion. I was looking in the order forms, what people had to say. I know we have some total beginners. That's cool. I'm glad you're here and getting exposed to this information. It may be a little above your head. Um, but yeah, so I'm not really designing this to like talk to beginners necessarily. It's kind of like, you know what this is right here. And we're going to break things down. A little bit of a deeper discussion. So we're going to run till 8:30 p.m. So another hour and a half is my kind of prescribed end time. And then I'm going to stick around for a bit longer if folks have questions and Q&A for a bit. But that's the plan. Um, if you have like clarifying questions, if I'm using a term you're unclear on or kind of quick questions, please put them in the chat box and I'll try and get to them. Bigger kind of derailing questions, please also put those in the chat box and I'll try and circle back in the Q&A and I might answer them in the moment. Sometimes these can be big subjects and I can get really distracted by other questions coming in. But please ask questions in the chat box. They really help me understand who I'm talking to. Because as far as I can tell, I'm talking to a computer screen right now. I have no clue who's in here. I don't know your experience level. It's very different than if you come to a vertical pursuits course. Our courses are maxed at 4 people. We get to know you. We see exactly where you are and we teach directly to that. I can't do that here. That's a bummer. A big benefit is I can spread this far and wide and you don't have to pay me any money and we can get you some continuing rock climbing education. I was about to say straight from the top, but that's calling me the top. And I'm not the top. I'm not your guru. I'm not a god. I don't know everything. But I have a lot of climbing experience. I have a third-party certification. That's the highest rock climbing qualification you can get in the United States, and that's internationally recognized. So maybe I might have an idea or two of what might work. So great. Our discussion tonight is a little, typically in my past webinars, if you're coming from past webinars, they've been pretty practical. They're pretty like, straight practical, and that's how we like our courses at VP, to be super just usable information, especially when you come out to us in person. This is going to be a little bit academic in the sense it's still really useful and important, but it's a little more intellectual, maybe not super punchy, right on, practical, hands on stuff. So hopefully you're here for it. There is going to be practical information, and you guys are going to ask me really practical questions. But I want to give a fair warning. Normally when I'm in person with folks, I don't waste their time with stuff that's not going to be boom, practical rock climbing, real trad climbing, real multi-pitch climbing, and not just kind of like, well, the textbook says, and in theory, yada, 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 yada. We're kind of against that, but we're going to dip our toe into that a little bit today, and hopefully you're in for it. So cool. Folks are still getting settled in. We got 19 people. That's pretty rad. I would love to ask you all a question to get us started, get you welcome into our chat box here. And my question, oh sweet, what up, Carter? You just popped up on my screen. Um, there's 19 other people here, but just you popped up. I'm digging the beard, man. I got one going myself. Um, Cool. So my check-in question for you guys is, who's somebody you look up to in climbing? Um, Let me know. I would love to just, throw in the chat. Hey, Sharon, thanks for saying hey in the chat. Yeah, Brenda's the real star here. So I'm curious, just to get you using the chat box and where you're going to ask questions and stuff and get us warmed up to the group. Who do you look up to in climbing? In my opinion, there's kind of only one answer to this question. Hazel Findlay, whoever I'm belaying, you literally look up to whoever you're belaying. Damn, that is a really friggin' good answer. I think you actually won. Your friends, I love that. Yeah, I love that. Your friends, right? I don't know. I used to get caught up in climbing media, and over time, I've kind of just like almost can't even look at it. And yeah, I'm psyched by the people around me in the world. So, all right, we got a shy group today. There's 20 people in here, and I only got 3 answers. That's all right. You'll loosen up. I think the only real answer, although I really do like whoever I'm belaying, is Lynn Hill. In my mind, there's only been two real rock climbers ever. Lynn Hill, and then the new kid on the block, Connor Herson. The rest of us, I don't know what we're doing, but those two people are rock climbers, and I don't know what we are. We're all just hikers as far as I'm concerned. Cool. David Brower. I'm not familiar with that name. David Brower and John Muir. Sweet. Thanks, Kevin. So cool. Thanks to those who chimed in. Um, where was I? Great. So we've kind of done our little intro. Let's give a little context to our discussion. Um, I like these longer form things. I still don't seem to, I'm trying to move this thing on my screen. There we go. Um, I'm into this longer form. A lot of people are learning from Instagram Reels, and it's like, man, I can barely describe the context to the discussion in that amount of time. So the context for our discussion is we're talking about multi-pitch, fifth class, rock climbing, and specifically trad climbing anchors. Okay, so why am I kind of emphasizing these points? So I'm not talking about 2-bolt sport anchors. I have an entire webinar on 2-bolt sport anchors. I saw some people in the order form. That's kind of what they were into. Sweet. There's a link coming your way to our previous webinars. I don't know if Brenda already put it in the chat box. Go check out that webinar instead. 2-bolt sport climbing anchors. This is not about top rope anchors, rigging off a tree with a static line to a boulder. It's not that what we're talking about isn't applicable to those things. It's just not really the context I'm trying to hone in so that we can get our teeth into a subject in an hour and a half. So I mentioned fifth class rock climbing. So I'm not really talking about scrambling, and you're going to do maybe different things in the alpine or on ice or on snow. So again, fifth class multi-pitch trad climbing where we're building gear anchors. And what that means is we're using more than 2 points, essentially. More technical term for this would be a proximal anchor. It's going to be anchor of points that are close together, proximal anchor. So we're using generally three or more pieces of trad gear. Can you build two-piece trad anchors? If you have to ask the question, the answer is no, basically. Cool. Previous webinars, a link went in there for the folks more interested in sport stuff. But stick around for this. But I'm just trying to kind of narrow down the context here. Cool. So if you're not a multi-pitch trad climber, then this conversation couldn't be interesting academically, but that's kind of what we're talking about. Multi-pitch trad climbing where there's not bolted anchors. Now, often there are bolted anchors, multi-pitch trad climbing. Yeah. I'll give you your money's worth right here. 2-bolt anchor, quad. Done. End of discussion. Not much more to say, to be honest. Quad is king. So cool. That's our context, kind of the boundaries of our discussion. Now, again, this is all applicable elsewhere, but if you try and take some of these concepts into the alpine and vice versa, I don't know. That's just, I'm narrowing down the framework here for myself. So my thesis for this discussion, so anyone who's here saw what I titled this. It was my kind of clickbait title, which was, I don't equalize my anchors and neither do you. Bit of a bold claim, but I vehemently believe it. And we're going to kind of break that down a little bit because it might feel like it spits in the face of all the other climbing instruction you've received. Maybe that statement even might seem like it spits straight in the face of what you've learned, maybe from instructors in the past or from your own research. But we're going to break it down a little bit. And I'm not, maybe the way I'm framing this is a little unique, but this is not cutting edge, just in Kevin's brain. If you read the textbook, which I've read the textbook, I've highlighted the textbook, I've taken notes on the textbook, right? It says it in there. It says what I'm saying here in there. And then it just goes on to talk about rigging this and rigging that and, different ways and forces and all that sort of stuff. But it says it. It says what really matters. And honestly, we've probably already gotten too far in this conversation to not mention what really only matters when building anchors. Okay? And that is that the individual anchor points are bomber. Beyond that, it doesn't really matter. And we're going to break this down. So this is key. I'm going to keep circling back because we're going to talk a lot about stuff that doesn't matter. And probably you should just be talking about the stuff that does matter. And that's one of my problems with how much equalization. I feel like it takes up so much of the mental space in climbing. That's what we see in these Instagram reels, all these sexy equalization techniques, and we're all talking about it. And we're like, oh, what do you think of this anchor? Oh, well, if I can't see the pieces, how do I know how the anchor is? So what matters when building, oh man, I'm getting slightly ahead of myself, but I feel like I need to say this as soon as possible. So what matters is the individual anchor points are solid, right? We know this. If we have a big tree, we only use one. We use one big tree because that tree is unquestionably solid. So what matters is bomber individual anchor points. The individual cams and nuts you're putting in have to be unquestionably sound. And for that to be the case, they have to be in good quality rock. You cannot put a perfectly contracted cam into poor quality rock. And have it be good. It's not going to be good. So I'm just going to write up here. Hopefully you can kind of see it. Bomber rock. That's only one word. Bomber rock and individual anchor points. Okay. So I wanted to get it kind of to the front of the webinar if we lose people. Like, that's what matters. Really good gear in really good rock. Okay. So to have good anchor points, you need good rock. If you don't have good gear, you cannot create a good anchor. You cannot polish a turd. You cannot place crappy pieces and think to yourself, oh, I'm going to use this sexy equalization trick I saw on Instagram, and now I'm going to be safe, and me and my partner are going to be safe. No, you cannot do that. You need good individual pieces. If you don't have that, there's a flow chart of decision-making processes. To keep it brief, keep climbing until you can find good gear, or climb back down to your last good piece and build an anchor there. There's kind of no excuse for bringing somebody up on a crappy anchor. Um, I've never been in the situation really where I couldn't um, continue climbing or go down. Now, I've been brought up on bad anchors, and I don't climb. Some of the was clients, and hey, this is a teachable moment. And then the other people I don't climb with anymore. Um, so we're gonna revisit this throughout because I want like the focus to be on this um, as much as possible. But anyway, let's get to kind of my thesis for this talk. This is how time flies in these webinars. My thesis is, and I haven't written a thesis in a while. Maybe I should have said this in the beginning. I dropped out of college. Um, I don't know. Don't don't take what I say as gospel, right? Add it to your knowledge and your experience. Factor it in, consider it, and see if it jives. See if it makes sense to you, right? Um, so I don't know much about a thesis, but my thesis is that equalization is cute, but it's A, not important, and therefore a possibly dangerous distraction from what really matters. B, equalization is not actually even possible. And C, equalization is not actually necessary. And thank God for that. Because as you'll see, there's no friggin' way. There's too many factors at play for even for researchers in a lab to get consistent loading results. So how the hell are we supposed to do it on a cliff? How are we supposed to determine the perfect direction of pull and how much this leg is going to stretch or this central leg is going to take the force or yada, yada, yada. So again, equalization is not an important aspect of anchor building. These are. We can't practically equalize an anchor, period. And then there's no need actually to truly equalize an anchor, and thank God for that. Now, I'm not saying like I have an example of a 3-point anchor here. This is beautiful. It's a cord clipped into the pieces, brought down to 1 point, and a knot tied. Now, construction-wise, like that's just fantastic. Now, how good is this anchor? Oh, it's terrible. It's on a piece of plywood, right? So that's kind of nodding to the fact that it's not the how it's tied together that determines if the anchor is good or not. It's the individual anchor points. In this case, they're in some terrible quality rock, this plywood board, and so it's therefore a terrible anchor. So part of me wants to kind of fire through some of these points and then try and give you some more practical stuff at the end. In practical stuff, I can't teach you how to assess rock and place bomber gear in my garage. So you kind of have to take a course to learn that is what I would recommend. Intro to Trad, July 19th. But I can show you some rigging stuff. So maybe we'll get to that towards the end of the webinar. But yeah, that's our framework that we're going to dive through today. Great. Sounds like people are here for it. So part one, equalization is not an important aspect of anchor building. We've already kind of started talking about this. Thinking we can equalize, thinking we can place bad gear and flakes and, oh, well, if I equalize it all, I'll be safe. That's can be, I think, a dangerous thing. Now, why I feel like this conversation is a little more academic than some of my other webinars, the rappelling webinar, people be dying rappelling, stuff like that. People aren't really, there's not a lot of anchor failures happening. Now, there was one famously recently in the Alpine in Washington pulling a single piton. That's a little different in, normal, I don't want to say normal, but like in standard rock climbing, we're not having anchor failures. And that's awesome. and that's great. And so that's why this is like a bit, you know, I'm kind of fighting a ghost of like this equalization terminology and really like how instructors um, present this idea and where people think they need to equalize. So I'll say it again, if you don't have good rock and you don't have good gear in that rock, so anchor points would be our gear, you cannot make a good anchor. Cool. And then another very important aspect of anchor building, right? We've seen if you have experience with this, there's acronyms for anchor building that help you kind of like see if your anchor is good or not. Earnest, serene, I don't know the other ones. And they're like, earnest, for example, is equalized, angle, non-extending, solid, and then timely. So there's five things to consider building an anchor, right? And I kind of hate acronyms. They are useful when we're new to remember things, but right, that acronym put the most important thing, solid, second to last, next to timely, which to me, I don't care. Like make it solid. You know, if it takes you a little bit more time, sure. Like, but it has to be solid. So, um, uh, but out of those, right, solid is the most important. I think I missed a couple in there, but and we've talked about that already. And then I'll add as a tier under this. So these are kind of in order. Bomber rock, because without that, I can't get bomber anchor points. And then I would say underneath that, I find redundancy super important. Okay, and then redundancy is this concept of if this, then what? You know, if this fails, then what happens? So if this cam explodes, what happens? You know, if this piece of material cuts, what happens? If part of my master point cuts, what happens? And if the answer is it all falls apart, then we need a little bit of a different strategy. So redundancy isn't our god because we only have one belay loop. My harness right now actually has two, but we only have one belay loop. We only have one gree-gree. We only have one belayer. That gree-gree is connected to one carabiner. We only have one climbing rope, right? So redundancy isn't, you know, numero uno, but we can think of redundancy we want redundancy in the rock, okay? Because I don't want to have all three of my pieces in the same little flake. I'd probably want to spread that out. Now, if it's a fissure in the mountain, unquestionably solid rock, that's all you got is that splitter. Yeah, put the three pieces in that one crack. But if there's any question to it, this piece is kind of, it seems pretty big and solid, but I'm not sure. That's why we want redundancy in rock. Let's also incorporate a piece over here. So we want redundancy in the rock. We want redundancy in the gear, meaning we're not going to belay off of one cam. We're not going to, I've belayed off of two cams like a couple times in my climbing career. Certainly not something I would recommend to a bunch of strangers on the internet. But I build three and more point anchors. So that's kind of what that's referring to. Now we break this rule with the tree or with a big boulder. And then also very important with redundancy is the material. And that's kind of what I was talking about with like, oh, if this cuts, what happens? If that cuts, what happens? We can get ourselves into trouble actually specifically with trees and boulders by throwing material around it, and we end up with something that's not redundant in material. So, you know, the other, you know, so yeah, so my acronym, this is a joke because it's not going to really work, but is BRAPPER, which if you ride motorcycles, which I don't, or like dirt bikes, they're really into BRAP. Um, I'll write this bigger. So bomber, rock, and anchor points, redundancy. Cool. Somebody send that to the AMGA. So great. So that's what matters with anchor building. Equalization's not high on the list. And you haven't heard me break down why that's the case because I wanted to get this stuff kind of in the front of the discussion. But we're going to continue kind of breaking those things, this idea down. So, and I'll say again, like the textbook agrees with me. And I'm referencing this ambiguous textbook. They do exist. I don't actually have the latest edition of Climbing Anchors um, by John Long and Bob Gaines, I think. I have the old one. Um, Brent, I don't know if you have any other links to share, but if you could share all the links I send you, that'd be great. It just popped into my mind. If you would like to help support the webinars, help me pay for Zoom or buy me, help me pay for a new Anchors book, there's a place you can send me a tip if you'd like. Completely not necessary. But so this is what matters with anchors, and yet oftentimes instructors, Instagram, even really high level people in the AMGA that kind of represent us internationally in technical discussions kind of emphasize equalization even when it's not even close to being there. And you, as a rock climber who are trying to be safe, you end up worrying about it, and and it's something you focus on when it's not important, as we'll kind of continue to explore. And there's tons of things like this, and I think, we have some more experienced people in the group, and you like those things that you worried about when you were a beginner, and then as you got more experience, you're like, oh, that's not a big deal. I see it all the time in my work where people are like, oh, well, you can't put metal on metal. And it's like, what? What do you mean you can't put metal on metal? It's like, I just did, So like stuff like that, right? And when we're up there trying to build an anchor and we're like, oh, are you allowed to put metal on metal? Is this perfectly equalized? I'm not sure. And angle. I can't have an angle over 90 degrees. So I can't use this really bomber piece over here because then my angle will be 100 degrees. So I have to use this shitty piece here instead to keep my angle under 100. And it's just kind of missing the prioritization. And that's how I think that some of these things that, like, sure, in a perfect world, the anchors equalize. I mean, but it doesn't have to be. But we can get distracted by these things. So let's move on from that. Sweet. I'm only 30 minutes in. I'm through point one. This is great. So my second thing was equalization is not possible. Not practically possible. Um, and let's talk about why. Now, okay, great. So Brenda shared the links. The top link is an article I wrote about this on my blog and website years ago. It kind of got messed up and hacked, and so don't try and read it, but it's got great visuals for some of the stuff we're going to talk about. So click that top link, old article I wrote on this subject, great visuals, follow along. Click on that. And that'll has, I used to have a lot of time back then. Um, I came straight from guiding today and I was like scrambling. I've been guiding the last 3 days, so my voice is probably going to go out. And by guiding, I mean teaching big walling. Today I was teaching multi-pitch trad, so on this subject. So I was scrambling to even get the computer open on time. So cool. So the next thing we're going to talk about is equalization is not possible. Let's start with that. So we'll start with the semantic argument. The term equalization is a really bad term for what we're trying to talk about here. What we should really be saying is load distribution, right? Because the term equalization suggests, just obviously wrongly, that we're going to be able to put equal force on each piece. That's what the prefix equal means. Now, I don't need to make semantic arguments. That's kind of silly, but not even in a lab situation can they get equal distribution. So really what we're talking about here is load distribution. And so equalization is not possible. Some sort of load distribution is possible, but we can't do it in any sort of predictable way at all when we're actually rock climbing. And so it still shouldn't be an important thing. There is probably some load distribution going on in our anchor, but there's no way we, as kind of the appliers of putting the tools into the rock and putting them together, could have any knowledge of how that load is actually going to be distributed. It's completely random. And again, when they do this in a lab setting, now I don't know if any climber has ever been in a lab, but when smart climbers that went to college, not like me, try and do this, and they'll do it even simpler with 2 points, only 2 points. And they'll tie it and they'll pull, and then they'll do the exact same thing and they'll pull and they get different results. Okay, so we can't in any appreciable way, understandable way, distribute load. So Um, and why is that? Well, there's just tons of factors that are going to affect which part, which component, or which leg. That old article of mine also has a great glossary of terms if you're kind of new to some of these terms. Here's three legs to my anchor, leg one, leg two, leg three. They all come down to a master point or a focal point. Um, I have no clue what I was just saying. Um, there's just too many factors that are going to affect load distribution. So we're not going to get any sort of repeatable result. So I'm going to build some stuff here with some chord. Um, how are we doing? We still got folks. Not a big questioning group. Nobody's got any questions yet. Nobody's crying foul yet. I thought somebody'd be crying foul, reaching out to the AMGA, being like, take this guy's cert away. So let's see if this will work. So I'm gonna just rattle off some factors that affect equalization. I don't want to get necessarily really deep into these because I think you'll just kind of agree with me and we can move on. And again, under the umbrella of we just can't practically distribute the load in any sort of understandable way. So one of the factors affecting load distribution is the direction of pull. So if I pull straight down on this, sure, maybe everything looks somewhat tensioned, but if my direction of pull changes even the slightest bit, this is completely slack now, and this is completely slack now. So, and what should the direction of pull be when we're building our anchors? That's maybe something we'll get in my last point of what is the anchor actually for? I would be curious to see what people think an anchor is actually for. It sounds like the dumbest question, but I am really curious what people would think. Um, so direction of pull is one example of how load distribution is going to be affected. And you on the rock are not going to get the exact perfect direction of pull. Something I want to highlight here, so this is your standard three-piece cordelet anchor. This is king. Just do that. End of webinar. Um, so let's do a quick quad. And let's do a three-piece quad, which I have a particular disdain for the three-piece quad. And it's a purely academic, nerdy disdain, but I still have it. Why do I dislike it? Well, it takes more time to rig than my three-piece cordelet I just removed. And I see very high-level guides saying that this is an equalized anchor. And it just drives me batty. It honestly ruins my day sometimes when I see it, and I keep seeing it. So this is a three-piece quad. Now, this doesn't even theoretically equalize, right? Half of my anchor over here, and there's great visual for this on that blog post. In theory, a quad from one side of the anchor to the other side of the anchor will split the load 50-50. So 50 will go on this cam. And then 50 would, in a perfect world, be split between these 2 points. So it'd be 25, 25, 50. And it drives me batty when people say, oh, this is equalized. I'm like, it's not even close to theoretically equalized. Like, it's just against the construction of the anchor. Anyway, that's a little more of like a nerdy semantic thing that just gets me, pet peeve that gets me fired up. But with these 2 points, and these are basically a pre-tied anchor here on their own. So watch, if I move the direction of pull at all, then which is supposedly the big benefit of the quad, that it can handle these multiple directions of pull. Well, it only is 25, 25, 50, again, in theory, in this one spot. If I move it a little, this is completely slack. If I move it a little this way, this is completely slack. So not worth the trouble to tie a three-piece quad. Just do a cordelet. But that's how direction of pull changes, affects our equalization. Let's see. The length of our individual anchor legs. Okay, so basically what this will come down to is a lot of these factors are due to basically effectively how much elasticity is in an anchor leg. So let's say I had three legs to my anchor, and one leg was 1 foot, one leg was 2 feet, and one leg was 3 feet. Well, the 3 foot leg is more elastic because it's longer, right? The entire climbing rope, right, is stretchy. If you only take 1 foot of it, it's hard to tell that it stretches. But if you hang on an entire rope, you're going to stretch down 15, 20 feet. So in that theoretical 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, a great visual again on that blog post. The 1 foot leg is going to, in theory, take 55% of the load. The 2 foot leg is going to take 27% of the load, and the 3 foot leg is going to take 18% of the load. Okay, so length of the leg takes on is a factor that affects equalization. The number of strands in a leg. So here I have one strand or two strands in each leg. So those will behave kind of similarly. But I could. I'm like still rigged to repel from work today. Um, how can I do this the fastest? Everyone's already falling asleep. They're like, really? Is he gonna keep talking about equalization? I'm like, yeah, dude, you signed up for this. So now if I were to tie an anchor like this, and I don't have enough material to tie a knot here, but just bear with me, right? So now I have two strands, four strands, two strands. So this has more strands. It's therefore less flexible, more rigid, and more force will go onto that. Side note, this is a great way to shorten up your piece of material. If your piece of material is really long and you bring it down the normal method, which in this case, it's not really long, it's really perfect. If this was way down, you wanted to shorten that up, flip, make this W, and then tie your knot here. One trick of many to shorten or lengthen your material, which is what I would be kind of neat to get through if I can get through this conversation. So that was number of strands in the anchor leg. And then another thing that's going to factor equalization, you guys are like, we get it. If there's a knot in the anchor leg, this leg has a knot in it. It's going to see almost no force because that knot has to tighten down. And by the time that happens, all the force has been diverted onto these other pieces. So that acts as elasticity in the anchor leg. Okay, the angle between the legs. So on this piece, this middle, ignoring the knot and ignoring all the rest of the things, the factors we've already discussed, this middle point's going to see all the load, the majority of the load, because it's straight in line with down, right? And there's a good visual again on the blog, but you know, if one of my legs, can you guys see this? Yes. If one of my legs is here and one of my legs is here to a piece, and my load, that's not obvious enough. Kevin, make it more obvious. How do I make it more obvious? Um, that's slightly different. But you know, if the angle, right, if this piece is more in line, this is a smaller angle than this piece is going to see most of the load. That's a 2-point example, but you get the idea. It's more in line with the load. So the angle. Great. Now for sliding master points, like our sliding master point anchors. So the most common modern example for that is the quad. What came into the climbing scene hot and left it kind of hot is the sliding X. You don't really see that anymore. If you're still a sliding X person, maybe don't be. I don't have time. I don't have time to talk about that too. But any sliding master point anchor, so sliding X, equalet, that even had a shorter heyday than the sliding X. That was hot for a minute. They thought that was the solution to this whole discussion. And the quad, they all have friction in their master point. And the sliding X, where you're doing this kind of twist, that has even more so. So that friction can have a clutching effect, and that will affect the load distribution. Don't worry, I'm only going to do a couple more. When tying knots in your anchor, oh, I taught a figure eight here. That's weird. I normally just do overhands in my, nothing wrong with an eight, but I usually normally do overhands in my quads. The way you twist these strands as you tie the knot is going to change how the load, maybe not this knot because it's only on one point, but back to my three-piece portalet. If me in a lab tries to tie this the same way once and then again, it will be different the way these strands curl through this knot. And so there'll be tension different, and the different legs will see tension differently. Um, Cool. And I think the last one I'm going to mention is the material in the anchor leg. So sometimes, when your pieces aren't this close together, you might use one of your alpine draws on the cam way up here to extend it down a little ways. Now, dyneema sling is quite static. Doesn't have much give to it. Does have a little, but doesn't have much. And so that material would act quite statically. If I had a similar length leg, but it was built out of nylon cordelette, say, or a nylon sling, that material is going to give more and divert force, therefore, away from that leg. So the more rigid a leg is, the more force it's going to get. Now, this cordelette that I'm using here, it's very, very, very short. It's not really something I carry. This happens to be new age, high-tech tech cord, which I love. That's actually kind of all the cordelette I have. This is all different types of high tech, or it's often called tech cord, but it's like 5 mil cord, which I love. This is 20 feet, and I don't normally carry 20 feet. I just haven't cut this down yet. I just got it. It's a pretty tight package. If you try and have 20 feet of 7 mil, oh my gosh, you're a mess. But I usually like to carry like 12, honestly, like 12 feet of high tech cord, and that can be a really tidy package. This is the kind of the cord I just retired, but I'm not going to bundle it up. But it's 12 feet of cord and it packs up real small. I love the tech cord stuff. Um, Great. So that was a list of just some of the factors that are going to affect how load is distributed through an anchor. Um, and with all those, I'm kind of pointing those out to just bring back to this point that equalization is not possible, right? And any sort of sweet, a question came in. I love questions, and it's a good question. I'll get to it in a second. Any sort of like, and yes, load can be shared, but not in any sort of predictable way, and we don't have to do that, which is going to be point three. And thank God for that, because if you're splitting the atom, you have to be really precise. If climbing was a game where we had to distribute the load and that's the only way we go home to our families, we'd all be dead. We'd all be dead. So thank God we don't, well, maybe you haven't multi-pitch drag climbed yet. But so you'd still be alive, but not for long. Um, so 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 right there's we're kind of brutish when we're rock climbing. We're not, and this equipment's all over engineered so that we don't have to, we're not on the razor's edge of everything snapping and falling to our deaths, right? There's kind of right, like, and that's kind of point three we're getting into. So if rock climbing, imagine it required you to balance and analyze all those factors in order to create a safe anchor that's distributed, we'd all be dead, right? So great. A couple questions came in. Let me hit them since we haven't gotten much, and I feel like I'm moving pretty quickly here. So Claire asks, when do you retire your cord? Great question. So tech cord is a little different than nylon cord. Let me see if I can find some nylon in my bin here. No, there is no nylon in the building. Um, it's too bulky for me. It's cheaper, so that's nice. But so tech cord, it is my understanding, actually needs to be retired more often. It's more susceptible to breaking down under repeatable loading. But and what is tech cord? Tech cord is, instead of having a nylon core, this cord has a dyneema core to it. this white dyneema. Dyneema can't be melted nicely, and that's why I can't melt the ends here. Um, some tech cord will have a Kevlar core. This one, I believe, is Kevlar, a little more of a yellowish color. Um, so I retired this just because it started to look a little tattered, and I'm supposed to be a professional. So that's kind of why I retired it. I bet it would still test extremely strong. Now, if you had actual core shots in your cord, definitely retire it. You know, for me, I've used this heavily for years and years. So I thought it was just time to upgrade. Anytime you look at your gear and you're kind of like, it's time to retire it. Now, if you're climbing enough to need to do that to retire your cordelette, congratulations. You are climbing a lot. That is dope. Now, something could happen. You could have this on the back of your harness and you're scraping up a 200-foot chimney pitch and you scrape a core shot in one go. So it's always good to check. Um, and I try, like I mentioned here, redundancy of material. I try and never really use my smaller materials in non-redundant ways. And one way I see people do that a lot is here's my rappel extension from guiding earlier. Is it rappel extensions? I'll see a lot of instructors and it's very commonplace to suggest rappel extensions that are not redundant in material. So one example, and see the rappelling webinar that I did, is an offset. I'm going to do it with a double length. That's going to fit on camera better. I just got my first triple length sling and I'm pretty happy about it. Um, they'll recommend an offset basket hitch and then you tie a knot and you end up with, you know, this nice short spot to put your ATC when you rappel and this nice long spot to clip into the anchors as you go down. And this is everywhere in the guide world. People are teaching this. And to me, I'm like, that material is not redundant. What if I scrape that up a chimney? What if it's been dragging around in my trunk for like 7 years or something, you know? Or and it's not a strength problem. I know this is strong. It's a what if that got some battery acid on it somehow, you know? I don't know. When your stuff's super shiny, you're like, yeah, I'll use it not redundant. When your stuff looks like my stuff, you're like, ugh, I don't want that to be redundant. Um, oh, I got off on a tangent there. So hopefully that helps answer the question of when do you retire your cord. Um, now, the manufacturer would probably say 10 years, 10-year kind of shelf life. Now, that's not a magic number. It's not like it degrades at 10 years, it's unsafe. But like that's the general recommendation for cam slings would be 10 years. This cam has actually been reslung. It's older than 10 years. I got it professionally resewn. Um, so you could consider reslinging, you know, or get replacing your cord at 10 years. Although honestly, look at it. How does it look? Does it look good? It's good, you know. Um, okay. Now everyone's like, oh my gosh, don't ask him a question. He talks forever. Do you have any major preference between cord or nylon slash dyneema slings? For general anchor building, I use a bit of both. Like, right? Like I'm going to carry I'm going to have, now this starts to get in the discussion of, well, what do you bring with you on a multi-pitch? That is a huge discussion about self-rescue. That's what that conversation's about. Intro to self-rescue, August 2nd. Let's do it. I like to carry a cordelette and then I like to carry another longer piece of material. Now, for me and my skill set, I consider a quad length sling. I could take over the world with a quad length sling. Give me a quad length sling and like a single D and a single HMS locker. And yeah, I'm into your bank account. So, so yeah, a piece of cordelette. I love dyneema slings. They're very compact. Um, I don't know why I love compactness. I'm just now realizing it. Um, Nylons, it's just kind of bulky. There's some force absorption to nylon because it's a bit more dynamic, but to me, that's like an armchair concern. That's just how I roll. I'm not so worried. My body's made out of water. It's going to deform and absorb force. Knots are going to absorb force. Even static material is going to absorb force. So I'm a fan. And yeah, I'll often carry, it's going to depend on your objective. It's going to depend on so many things, but you need definitely at least two anchors, right? Because you're building an anchor and your partner's hanging on an anchor. And then what if something bad happens and you need to do something? So you probably need a piece of material to affect some sort of system or rescue skill. And of course, you need the knowledge to do that. So I love tech cord. I love dyneema slings. Nothing wrong with nylon. It's cheaper. It's quite bulky. And then maybe I'm not going to carry it. Do I have any tips for using rope to make an anchor? Yes, I do. That's a huge discussion. How do you take into account the different elasticity of the materials when building an anchor? I don't. So you're using the rope in the anchor question is great. That's a bit of a derailment. Maybe I'll get to that to the end. But this question, how do I take into account the different elasticity on materials when building an anchor? All those factors I just listed and kind of the point of this webinar is I don't. I don't take any of that into consideration. It's not practically an issue. Um, right? It's not this mathematical equation I'm working out. I'm a dumb monkey up on a cliff just tying a knot. I can't really figure out how to put all those things into account. Okay, so that's kind of the point I'm making this whole evening and I haven't gotten to point number 3 yet, which is proving that equalization is not necessary. Worrying about any of this is not necessary. What's necessary? I haven't said it in a while. Bomber rock, bomber anchor points, and redundancy in rock gear and material. Okay, that's what matters. If you have bad gear, you have a bad anchor. So I'm putting the 3 pieces in and I'm bringing them down. I'm doing a cordelette like this. This is the anchor I do. I've been doing this a long time. I'm not doing anything fancy. Now, there's fancy ways when your pieces aren't all right next to each other and all nice to make things longer, make things shorter, but this is your anchor. You take your loop of material, clip, 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 bring it down, and always the knot or bar tack gets in the way. Bring it down like that, and you tie a knot. Which way do you point it? Which direction? Down. You tie a knot, and you don't worry about the little, oh, this is slightly not equalized. I have to, no. We don't worry about all that stuff. So great question. Where do you buy the cord? I think, who did I get this from? A bunch of companies make it. This orange cord I really liked is called Sterling VTX cord, 5.4 millimeters. This is brand new. It's 5 mil. I think it's from, I'm not sure who it's from. But lots of companies like rope companies like Sterling or Maxim or whatever will have their own kind of specialty brand and they'll call them different things. Cool. So using the rope in the anchor along with Jessica's question is really big and awesome and super practical, but let's get through our little armchair discussion here and then maybe I can incorporate that in. Now, my tips for using the rope. The rope is awesome, and what I love to use the rope for is when one of my pieces is far away, because I built 2 here and I'm not so psyched about the rock, so I want to incorporate this piece up here. But it's like, man, it's kind of far, and the rope is a really long piece of material that we can use. And my suggestion would be don't overthink it so much. Just get it somehow connected. That's kind of my approach with anchor building in general, right? As long as the piece is good, somehow involve it. Somehow, get creative with it. That spits in the face a lot of, oh, it's got to be perfect, this and that. No. Are you using climbing knots? Sure. Are you using climbing equipment? Is it involved? Then you've got it. And maybe I'll have time to get into that a little bit more here in a second. Cool. So my next claim, equalization or even load distribution at all is not necessary. And thank God for that. So this is where it all kind of comes together. And perhaps this sounds like a bold claim. Equalization is not necessary. I mean, maybe, I don't know where you guys are at this point in the discussion, but it's like all those factors we listed, we have no clue how load is being distributed in our anchor. And we haven't talked about the big thing. The real big one, I think, is direction of pull. So I'm going to make the claim, and you guys can see if you agree with me or not, that equalization, any sort of load distribution is not at all necessary. And so it's funny to come to this part of the discussion now, but what is an anchor for? I actually would love to see people say in the chat, what is the anchor for? Like, why did I? Because I'm leading the pitch and I'm placing one piece and I am whipping on one piece. Now, there's other pieces behind it. There's a system in place. I'm not whipping on one piece, but I fall a lot trad climbing. It's something I find enjoyable. It's pushing myself. Um, I fall all the time. So why am I whipping on one piece and then I go to the top of the pitch and I put three or four together just to sit on, just to belay my follower? That's barely any force. Why do I have to put three things in? Any takers? What is the anchor for? In like worst case scenario, like why are we actually putting this all to what is the worst case scenario of our anchor? I'll give another few seconds here if somebody wants to give a stab at it. Um, maybe I'll erase some space on my board. Yes, ASDF has got it. Fall factor two. That's the worst case scenario. Now, in my opinion, fall factor two is not actually that insane, but that's a whole nother webinar. But yeah, you got it right, Mr. ASDF. Fall factor two. So for the uninitiated, what is a fall factor two? It's kind of in theory the worst fall that can be taken. It can only be taken on a multi-pitch because it requires that the ground isn't there. Because otherwise you would just hit the ground. And so the idea with the fall factor two is, let's say this is our anchor, and I climb up 5 feet from my anchor. If I take a fall without clipping anything, I'll fall this 5 feet down another 5 feet, 10 feet. So I'll have fallen 10 feet divided by the amount of rope out, 5 feet, equals 2. And that's fall factor. And that's kind of, you can actually take higher fall factors, but geez, let's not talk about it. So in this discussion, that's kind of the highest fall factor you can take. And this is a great way of loosely estimating the amount of energy in a fall. As it approaches fall factor two, it's like really high levels of energy. Now, I don't necessarily want to talk extensively about fall factor. So it's amount of rope. So length fall, nobody can read this, divided by rope, the rope in the system. So if you take 100-foot fall, that's insane. That must be so much energy, right? But if you take that 100-foot fall, where was our fall here, on 200 feet of rope, it's actually only a fall factor of, oh my math, 0.5. So it's actually less energy than that 10-foot fall. So that's a very kind of brief thing on fall factor. And we can only generate a fall factor two because it requires falling past the belay on a multi-pitch climb. So that's this horrible worst case scenario. That's actually the reason we're building our anchor. And people, people think they build their anchor so that they can clove in and sit there and then top rope belay their partner. That's no force at all, guys. We're whipping, even whipping is like not that much force. Let's not get lost in numbers just yet, right? But we're not building this so that I can hang my body on. I weigh, like a little over half a kilonewton. Kilonewton's not a weight measurement, it's a force measurement. Don't at me, but right? So it's not to weigh my body on and then belay my follower on top rope, where if they take the world's gnarliest top rope fall, it's going to be like 3 can, maybe. So I'm not building this anchor to hold that. I'm building it for the worst case scenario, which is a fall factor 2. So that's what an anchor is for. Now, Well, what's the amount of force in a fall factor 2? This is a long discussion. I have an opinion on this. I don't think the forces are actually that high. We don't need to get into it, but belay devices slip. They don't lock the rope. They have some they slip. I've been rappelling on a gree on a single strand, and it's just keeps sliding through the gree. Now I don't want to get into numbers, although I kind of really want to. But if I'm belaying here and my partner takes a fall factor 2 directly onto me, once my belay device experiences enough force for it to start slipping, it's going to slip and convert that force into heat and friction in my hand. Hope you're wearing gloves, and in the rope and in the device. And so let's say that device slips at 3 kilonewton. I kind of don't want to give specific numbers, but I could. Oh, I'm so tempted. It's so nerdy. But with a I'm doing it. With a 300 Newton hand force, not kilonewton, singular Newton, 300 singular Newtons of hand force, which is, a reasonable braking hand force, an ATC is going to slip at 1.8 kilonewtons. So you fall factor 2, what's the amount of force going on to the anchor? 1.8 kilonewtons. Because the device just starts slipping. Now, lots of rope's going to run through, and hopefully you're wearing a glove because you'll burn your hand and you'll let go. Now, a gree with a 300 Newton hand force, what's the number? Well, if I say it wrong, I'm going to be in trouble. You have no way of checking my work here, but it's actually in one of my other blog posts. I think it's 3.8 kN. So a fall factor 2 is not exploding things because of the real world. The real world, we're belaying on a belay device. The belay device slips. Now the rope has a maximum impact force. That's not for a factor 2 fall. It's tested on a factor 1.77 fall. But that's going to limit things. So anyway, but let's not get lost in numbers, although I already just did. Did I lose everyone? Is anyone still here? Oh, I think I only lost a couple people. Wow. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that a fall factor 2 does 15 kilonewtons. Why the number 15? Your belay loop, that is the requirement of a belay loop, to hold 15 kN. That might surprise you, right? Our carabiners are 24. Really? The belay loop's only 15? Yeah, that's what a belay loop has to be rated to, 15 kN. So let's just say that we're gonna create this kind of worst case scenario to help us prove that equalization doesn't matter. And I'm gonna need let's see if I can find quickly. Um, uh, oh, is it here? Is it here? Looks like it would be here. I'm trying to look for my number 0, Z4. Okay, we might have to do it with a 0.1 because I can't find the 0. I didn't have much prep time today. I was scrambling. So let's say a fall factor 2 is 15 kilonewton, which absolutely no way. Your internal organs are going to start just shredding themselves at 12 kN. That's actually why our carabiner is rated to 24. Double that. Why double? Well, because if you catch 12 on one side of the carabiner in a whip, whoa, your belayer has to catch 12 on the other side, and that puts 24 on the individual carabiner you're whipping on, right? And so they just decided, oh, let's make it the standard 24 for carabiners. But yeah, your insides turn to jello, and you probably spine's broken at 12 kN. The cable on a nut will fail at 10 kN. How many recorded nut cable failures are there? Very few. I actually heard about one recently. But I think that was a damaged cable. But anyway, so let's say it's 15 for the sake of argument. And let's say my anchor is 3. Okay, cool. 3.1s. 0.1s. This is rated to 5 kilonewton. So this is an extreme example. Don't build an anchor out of 3.1s. and also don't take 15 kilonewton falls. But let's say I built my anchor out of 3.1s, which is rated to 5 kilonewtons. Now, they better be in bomber rock. A small cam has a very small margin for error for shifting, for being in a dirty crack. Be cautious with small cams. The smaller the cam, smaller margin for error. So assuming it's bomberly placed, um, this will hold, 5 kilonewton, probably more, and they probably dumbed it down to give the strength rating, but 5 kN. So my belay loop is only rated to 15. Are we doing the math already? If I build a 3-point anchor and I don't equalize it at all, don't do this. I'm not saying do this. I'm just saying tie the cord and still apply that concept of like, yeah, bring it all to one point and tie a knot. Just don't think you're equalizing because that could make you think you can put bad pieces together and make something good. You cannot. So let's, this is my anchor. Now this has a different problem, which is actually this is just not quite doing what I want it to do to demonstrate this properly. Let me see. I'm trying to tie it so that only one, it's like it's so ingrained in me to do this kind of well, it's hard to do it badly. Okay, I did it badly. So these are like very slack and in no way equalized. And this is kind of egregious. Like I would probably fix this. Um, and I just remembered something I should bring up about direction of pull, which is build your anchor for a downward pull, because that's where that fall factor 2, the worst possible force. We don't need to build our direction of pull for the top rope. That's not a big deal. That's not much force. We're building it for that fall factor 2, so it's down. But okay, so I built this. Imagine these were at 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, or 0, 0, 0. The 0 is also rated to 5 kN. And I take this 15 kilonewton belay loop snapping fall. My fall is going to impact this piece first. This one on the left is the only one under tension. I have no equalization at all. Once that fall hits 5 kilonewtons of force, so the force graph is going to look like this. Oh, the force is increasing, and then it hits that threshold of 5. Ping, that piece breaks. Okay, now we're on our next piece because we had no equalization at all. The force over time graph is going to go up, 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 hit that 5 kN, ping, that piece is going to break. No equalization at all, right? No load distribution. Now we hit our third 0.1 in a row. The force graph is going to go up, 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 up to 5, that 5 kilonewton threshold. And let's say it actually holds 5.1. So we have 15.1 overall because we're pretending our 15 kilonewton fall factor 2. I don't know actually what happened if it ended up being exactly 555. We don't have to get into that. Ping, maybe not. Maybe not ping, right? It'll hold that last one because it's not about, and this is how you often see these pull tests being done in climbing. Maybe you don't see the pull test, but they'll use a machine to slow pull. And the result from this anchor we just built out of 3.1s not equalized at all, in a slow pull, slowly pulling, gets to 5, breaks, gets to 5, breaks, gets to 5, breaks. The total result would be, they would say 5 kN. But that's not the true story. The true story is it's not just the peaks of the graph here, the 5 kN. This is all the force that's been absorbed. It's actually absorbed, right? Force isn't created, absorbed. This slow pull is continuously applying the force. If we're falling, we're falling once, that 5 kilonewton got absorbed when that piece, it had to rip that piece out, right? Force can't be created or destroyed. The force of my fall went to destroying that cam. So this actually is absorbing, and engineers, I don't know if Michele's in here. That guy's smart as hell. He can tell me if I'm totally leading people astray here. But I don't think he's in this conversation. Right? It's the force absorbed is adding up. Let's not get lost in specific numbers, but 15 in my three individual pieces. Now, remember, this was a worst case scenario, three of the smallest cams on the market and a 15 kN fall, which is going to turn your insides to jelly and snap your belay loop. Okay, so now let's bring it a little bit back in the real world. I don't give that example to help you give confidence in bad low strength placements. 5 kilonewtons is still strong. I give that example so that when you're, when you're actually not using all point ones because you're not an idiot and you have a 0.5 in there. What's a 0.5 rated to? Right? Still not a humongous cam. I'm guessing, any guesses? I'm guessing 12. I'm gonna go all the way to 12. Oh, nailed it. 12 can. It says on your sling, by the way. 12 can. This guy, 12. So three pieces in good rock. We good. We good if we mess up the equalization, which of course we have never gotten it right because of all those things we listed earlier, right? Um, if all that load goes to one point, which it will mostly, we live. Okay. And that's why we're not seeing anchor failures all the time. Um, cool. This got a little nerdy here. Um, I hope that made sense to folks where it's like there's actually, even though a slow pull result would say, oh, failed at 5 kN, but the total force absorbed, I believe it's considered the area under the curve in these force application graphs. Please, I'm sure there's an engineer in here. Fix what I'm saying. The force under the curve tells the real story of the amount of force absorbed there. And it's totaling up to 15 in my little made up example. Now, when each piece fails, there's an amount of extension that's going to increase that force back up because now I'm falling again. Um, but anyway, let's not get lost in those specific numbers. Um, but yeah, 813. Man, I've never finished kind of early what I wanted to talk through. Now there's still more to fill in the gaps here, but let's just go back a little bit. I started by saying that equalization is not important, and it can be a dangerous distraction because people or equalization or any of these other earnest serene things can be a distraction from what really matters, which is bomber rock, bomber gear in bomber rock, and redundancy. Brapper. You guys are on board. Brat. Um, so equalization is cute. That wasn't really part of the thesis, but I did start with that. It's a cute idea. I'm it's a cute idea, but it's not important. It's not possible. Remember all those factors affecting how load is distributed. And there's some footnotes in the article. Those used to all be workable links. Those are all the sources. And some of them you can still follow. And you can look at some of these studies that are showing how equalization is, they just get no repeatable reasonable results. Actually, one study that tested a sliding X, a equalette, a quad, and a cordelette, just tied like normal, the best result, and it was only on 2 bolts, the best result, if you would have asked me, I would have said quad, hands down. The quad is the best equalizing anchor. That's not why we use it, by the way. We use it because it's just kind of convenient to keep it tied, and it has 2 nice master points. We don't use it because it's super strong and that it equalizes well. But that wasn't the answer. The right answer, the one that equalized the best was the 3-piece, the normal cordelette tied was the best result they got. Now, it was also the worst result they got, but it was the best result they got. So they repeatedly pulled it, right? And one of the times actually they did it. They got near perfect equalization. But then later the quarter, it averaged only 2% worse then the quad averaged, pre-tied quad. Anyway, um, so I was trying to just recap, Kevin. Come on. Equalization is cute. It's not important. This is what's important. It's not possible. There's too many factors going on for us to not just equalize, but even load distribute in any reasonable way, any intelligible way. And then it's not necessary because our gear, when placed in good quality rock, is strong enough for that worst case scenario, um, which, again, the exact numbers there are a little bit debatable. Um, cool. Somebody's signing off. We got some good questions coming in. Let's hit them here. Um, so, but like, so where does this leave us? Where does this leave us? What I would like to emphasize is this really this rule number one: bomber gear and bomber rock, and it's bomber rock. Okay, I think that's what we don't focus on. And you have the potential to get kind of tunnel vision, and maybe you build your all three pieces in this flake or in this block. We want to get it in good rock, and if we're a little unsure of the rock, let's make sure we get it into we get some of our points into separate chunks of rock. Um, I've been brought up on a terrible anchor that was like between two boulders on a ledge. And they were like, it's four pieces and it's equalized. And I was like, yeah, but I can kick that boulder over, right? So and I hope this helps just boil away stuff that's not critically important, right? And I know where you guys are at sometimes when it's like, because I see it all the time in my students where they're like, oh, do I need an upward directional piece in my anchor? Are you allowed to do metal on metal? Oh, like the cams, I need to place the cams so they don't walk. These are all possible webinar topics, but it's like you want to be safe, so you're trying to remember all these things. There's so many different rules to remember. And I want to just help get rid of some of those concerns, right? It's like, is the gear good? Is it in good rock? Great. Connect it somehow, put it together somehow, and you've got a good anchor if these two things are satisfied, right? I've been teaching some more advanced courses, more advanced multi-pitch courses, and I taught a multi-pitch efficiency webinar, and what slows people down is anchor building because they think they have to do this little minutia, you know, measure everything, get it all perfect, and it's like, no. If that's what mattered, climbing would be really horrifying and I wouldn't be a climber. If we were really slicing the margin that thin, that I'll only be safe if I get this to share the load. Whoa, that is a scary activity that I don't want any part of, to be honest. But cool. So that's a bit of a, a wrap up there. Let me look at some of these questions. We have about 10 more minutes of my standard time, and then I'm going to take some questions. So I'm just scrolling back here. Fall factor 2, cool. Cool. Serene, they teach no extension. That's a part of Serene. Serene I like a little better because that S is the start. Solid. Boom. Right on you. No extension. With that in mind, is it dangerous to make a non-equalized W three-piece trad anchor with one or even two legs slack? Yes, that's what I've been saying this whole time. You don't, yes. You don't, I mean, don't do it intentionally. Don't intentionally make legs slack. This is when I realize when people ask questions of like, wait, that's been the whole point. I'm like, man, I'm not the best presenter over the internet. W anchor, I think this is what you were talking about, more or less, right? He's saying, is it okay to tie it with one or two of the legs slack? That's kind of what I'm talking about. We don't need to get precise that everything is tension because of everything we've discussed tonight. Even if it looks tensioned, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean it's sharing an appreciable amount of the load. It just means it looks tensioned, right? So don't intentionally tie things unslack. And yes, there's gonna be some extension, but if there's a bit of slack and a piece fails, but it's and Serene says no extension, and that's wrong. That cannot be done. It should be limited extension. But again, even with an inch or two or three, 3 inches of extension, I'm not going to suddenly create 15 kilonewtons of force. Um, so is it okay if one or two of the legs are slack? Yes, that's what we've been talking about all night. Or is the idea the one loaded piece should be strong enough so it doesn't matter? Sorry, I didn't keep reading your question. Yes, that. Love the visuals in the blog article. Yeah, they're really good. Dexter loves the nerdy talk. Yeah, I'm down to get nerdy. I try and keep it real practical for folks and circle it back around. I do have the nerd background. I do have the textbook background. I do have the certified guide background. And then I also have the tons and tons of climbing experience, first descents, big wall first descents, climbing hard, whipping, climbing all over the world, that background as well. So I love putting it all together. Cool. Some folks had to dip out. Isaiah asked, how much do you think about upward pull on the anchor if your climbers falls? Great. I mentioned this earlier, and I had somebody ask me about this today. I need to do something with my beard. Jesus. Um, I should have read the full question. So for everybody on the YouTubes later, how much do you think about upward pull on the anchor? How are we on time? If your climber falls after having clipped a piece and pulls you up. Okay, great question. So I alluded to this already. And this is another one of those kind of, I don't want to say it's a myth, but it's this thing that exists in the climbing ethos that keeps coming back. And I swear every day I teach. Whenever I say guide, I mean teach. I don't really guide anymore. Man, getting paid to guide 5'9" sounds awesome. I'm talking all day and teaching all day and jugging up ropes and down ropes, and it's a lot of work. Somebody hire me to go climb some 5'7". That sounds chill. But it comes up, this is one of the things that comes up every time because it's so confounding. The idea, and let me break it down for people, right? The idea is if you build an anchor, maybe they're saying you should put a piece for upward pull because if you catch a fall higher on the pitch, just like in the gym, you get lifted up off the ground, you're going to get lifted up and you're going to pull up on your anchor. And so you should have an upward pull piece to stop you from potentially pulling that anchor out. So what I'll say to that is you probably do have an upward pull piece in your anchor without even trying. I would say 95% of cam placements are not upward pull, but they are multi-directional. So this cam here, I'm going to place it for downward pull. But if I get pulled up, it's going to pivot. And it doesn't need to hold its full strength upward. It just needs to stop a little bit of force upward. So if you build your anchor, so if your anchor includes a cam, it's already multi-directional, you're all good. Now, let's do my little thought experiment of let's do the worst case scenario. Let's build an anchor out of 3 nuts. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I like to have a cam involved for its multi-directionality, but let's say this is the worst case scenario, 3 nuts. And they're all, you can place nuts that can take an outward pull, maybe not a straight upward pull, but hey, you've probably tried to clean nuts and you're like, can't get it out, right? So let's say it's 3 gingerly placed nuts and I catch that fall and I get lifted up and I rip all those 3 nuts out. Well, what happens after you catch a fall in the gym and you get pulled up off the ground? You're just sitting there off the ground because now you and your partner are hanging off of that top bolt or that top piece of gear. So in that worst case scenario where all 3 nuts rip, just put them back and lower yourself back down onto the anchor. Okay, so no need to incorporate a piece for dedicated upward pull. Hopefully that answers that, Isaiah. And I get asked that question a ton because for you, you're like, oh, that's so annoying. It's so hard to add that in. Really? I have to do that? That's so dumb. Yes, it is. And you don't. So hope that helps with that question. Another person had to run. Great. Another question. Is a 2-piece gear anchor on pieces larger than 7.5 and a really good crack okay? I mentioned this earlier. If you have to ask the question, the answer is no. That's a really like kind of rude way to answer the question. I mentioned this earlier. I've built a two-piece anchor like two times in my climbing career, two or three times. And again, I'm in a fifth class rock climbing context. In an alpine context, mountaineering, scrambling, that has way more application. Um, Cool. So they clarify someone with a cert did this with me and I didn't think it was okay. You didn't think it was okay. Cool. Go to that link, amga.com/hire-a-guide, and look that guide up and see if they actually have a cert, A. And I have friends who do this, two-piece anchors, and that person, if they are certified, they it's if it was done like right, if it was done by a qualified person, it makes sense. For me, it would be pieces bigger than a number one probably. But again, I've only felt that I've only done it a few times in my climbing career. We're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of trad anchors that I've built. I just don't see the need. I want three-piece anchors. And what I worry is if we perpetuate, and I see it perpetuated on Instagram, etc., where people are like two-piece anchor, two-piece gear anchor, you know? And I'm like, there's context to all this, and we don't have the room. You know, I don't think that person was necessarily being unsafe with you. Um, you know, if it's a crack in the mountain and we're on larger cams, I hesitate to say it on the internet to a crowd of people I don't know. I'll just say I've only done it a few times in my climbing career. If the rock is unquestionably sound and the cams are larger, you could consider a 2-point anchor in a fifth class climbing context. If maybe it was the scramble to finish and it's lower angle, it's therefore less force. I mean, the forces are really, really small, but it's a security issue. But you know, don't think that that guide was necessarily unsafe, is what I want to say. You know, I don't want to recommend it to a group of strangers on the internet. And I almost always, you know, 99.99999% of the time, build three-piece anchors or more. I often do four and five-piece anchors. When it's small gear and small nuts, and I'm just sitting there on the anchor belaying, I'm like, la-di-da. Oh, here's another placement. Why don't I just clip that in? And I keep belaying. So Caroline, yeah, don't think that that person was necessarily being unsafe. And I think you're right to be like, ooh, I don't really like that. I don't really like it either. That's why I don't really do it. And other people, you know, draw the line elsewhere. Um, how many times have nobody asked this question, I'm asking it to myself because I like to hear myself talk. How many times have I had one of the pieces of my anchor pull out? Zero. And yet I'm about I like three-piece anchors. How many times have I had a piece pull out when I'm whipping and I fall a lot on my gear? It's one of my favorite things to do. Once, early in my climbing career, when I had just gotten micro cams, I ripped a .2. Thousands of trad falls. Now, aid climbing falls, I've ripped some gear. I've ripped a lot of gear. That's kind of aid climbing. That's kind of what it's all about. That's the whole game. So, so yeah, Caroline, I hope that helps with your question. I don't want to necessarily say that was unsafe. I know, you know, when you first asked your question, I thought you were asking if it was okay for you to do it. I don't know who you are. You know, if a truly actually certified person did that, and uh, I think they did it for a good reason. And in an alpine context, we do two-piece anchors more frequently. And we do all sorts of weird stuff in an alpine. We're talking like scrambling, maybe 5-2, 5-3 climbing. We play this game totally different. And that's kind of why at the beginning of this discussion, I was like, we're talking about fifth class technical rock climbing. Boom, I hit 8:30. So that was when our time was done. Now I'm going to stick around for a little more time if we have more questions, but that's 8:30. So I would like to thank you all for coming. I hope it was useful. Please share this. You will get sent a recording. Have these discussions with your climbing partner on the drive to the crag. And, you know, it's going to be fruitful. Don't take what I say as gospel. add it into what you already know and incorporate it into your knowledge, your understanding, what you like to do when you go rock climbing. Think for yourself and check us out at Vertical Pursuits, upcoming courses, Intro to Trad July 19th, Intro to Multi-Pitch July 20th, Trad Beyond the Basics July 19th, Intro to Self-Rescue, August 2nd. Check out the calendar. If you'd like to help me pay for Zoom so that I can run these, you can send me a couple bucks on Venmo. That's awesome. Absolutely not required. It's really my pleasure to be able to give this information out over the internet like this and help kind of cut through the middleman and make it more accessible to people so they don't have to pay me a bunch of money to take my time in person and then drive all the 4 hours to meet me and then yeah, it's great for me to get the information out there. So yeah, thank you for coming. And like I said, if you have more time, stick around and we can do some more questions. And really, really my pleasure. So you guys are all welcome. You're welcome, iPhone. Um, and yeah, if you got to sign off, sign off. Thank you so much. And otherwise, I'll stick around for some questions. If there's not more questions, I can maybe go back to one. I think I missed the rope. I could go the rope thing. It's hard to do in the garage, but I could give a little coaching on that. Um, cool. I don't think anyone left. So hello. I'll go back to that rope question if that person's still here. Anyway, I think I was expecting that question, and so I brought some rope. Um, and the question was, how would you use the rope to build an anchor? Now, in the UK, they do that a ton. Um, And it's interesting how we will do different things in different countries and how, based on the rock they have available, right? In the UK, they climb a lot on double ropes. Why? Because they don't have splitter cracks like we have in California, baby. So they have to place a piece over here and then wander over this way and fiddle a piece and then wander over that way and fiddle a piece. So they use two different ropes to help with drag, but we're just climbing splitters here in America. Anyway, geez, this is the point. I've been teaching for 3 days straight, and then I had like rushed to this, so like my brain's jelly. This is when I start saying stuff that gets me into trouble. But okay, so the question, and let me make sure you guys can see me. I don't even know if this person's still here, but oh man, my microphone doesn't reach. I'll have to stand here. Um, the question is basically using a rope in the anchor. Now, there's a billion ways to do that, and I'm not going to take the time. But the most practical way I use the rope in the anchor, the rope's fantastic to use in anchors. We should do it more as recreational climbers, especially when we're swinging leads. Now, you got taught how to build anchors from a guide, and the guide got taught how to build anchors to be a guide. And we don't swing leads when we guide, and so we use cordelettes. But you often might swing leads when you climb with a friend, so you might as well use the rope because if you use the rope, you're tied into the anchor now. And so if you're leading the next pitch, you'd have to break the anchor apart. So that's why swinging leads matters. I could build the rope anchor with the rope. And then if we're swinging leads, that's fine because you go out next. How I practically often use the rope in an anchor, I'm looking for a shorter piece of material. Here it is to try and get that one far off piece involved. I have these two right here. Pretend these aren't bolts. Pretend this is trad gear. I have these 2 points, and those are nice and close to each other, and I'll just bring those to one. But I'm not stoked on the rock here. I think it's pretty good. I think the rock is good, but I'm not certain. And we're not certain because we're not, I don't know, geologists. Who even knows how solid a rock is? So, or maybe I don't have a piece this size for this spot. So I need to go like way over here, way more than over here, far. I just don't have the screen time. So I would come to this point. This is just one way of a million. And usually when I show stuff like this, I'm just like, here's one way. And then people just like latch onto it and they always mimic that one thing I showed. Try and take the concept here and think of how you can apply it in different ways. So I have a tiny master point that's going to annoy me in a second. I would build my first two pieces and I would clip my rope to it because that way I don't take a huge whipper while I'm doing this. And then I would climb to that higher piece that's in different rock. And then to incorporate it, one method would be to just clip it, then climb back down to my anchor. And then I'm going to clove. What am I doing here? I'm going to clove my, talking to myself. I'm going to clove myself in. Oh, I'm pulling my wall down. And imagine this all on a grander scale, right? And then I can clove this side in. Now I'll try and tidy this up for you guys in a second. I can't stand over there because my microphone cord's too short. And now I might make some adjustments. I like cloves because I can adjust them. And this is just, one way that I could have gone way up here and gotten this piece involved in the anchor. So we can play the game of, and I'm sorry, this isn't coming through very clear, I think, on the camera. This is one way that that piece is involved because I've cloved it in on both sides. And so if this piece were to fail, this is what I call the positive power of negative thinking. What can go wrong? What if this fails and this fails? Because that was in bad quality rock or that rock shifted and I wasn't expecting that. We have this involved, right? So this is one way, and not a particularly elegant way, I will admit, but kind of what I can show here. Come take a course with me. I was teaching this today, that we could get another piece involved. And there's a multitude of other ways. And don't overthink it. It's kind of like what I'm saying in this whole webinar. Just get it involved somehow. Use climbing equipment, use knots, and get this clipped in. If we were actually this close, I could just, you know, clip it in like that. It doesn't need to be locked. I don't know why I locked that. And you'd say, oh, that's so unequalized. Well, yeah, reference this entire webinar, right? And this is a little egregious. And so I'll just shorten that up, like kind of, sort of. Yeah, good enough, right? And this is one of the million tricks you can use. These are both two single length slings. So that's not a lot of material to do, an anchor. And this looks sloppy, and you're not going to see pictures of this in textbooks and stuff. But does it work practically? Is this a good anchor? People will always ask that. Is this anchor good? And they'll post a picture of it on the internet or something. And it's like, well, I don't know. Is the rock good? And are the anchor points good? Then yeah, I don't care about all the other stuff. Cool. I don't know if the rope person was even still in here, and I don't know how legible that was. Um, cool. So I'm not seeing any questions in, so I'm gonna call it there. Any topic. You can ask me a question on any topic. Preferably rock climbing related, but if it's not, now's a great chance. You have that burning question, that thing your partner said that you were like, I don't really, is anyone even here? 6 people. Okay, maybe I should shut up. Cool. I'm going to call it there. Have a great night. Thank you for coming. And we'll do another webinar. I'm trying to do these every month on a different topic and kind of create this collection. Come climb with us in person and be safe out there. Think for yourself. This is not golf. This is rock climbing. Rock climbing is dangerous. So be a little paranoid and keep you and your friends safe. And I hope to see you out at the crag. Good night.